Matinva, Falche Olive, which I'm hoping means something along the lines of good morning. Welcome to you all. And it's my first attempt at Gaelic on a video blog because I am in a part of the world where that language is spoken more widely than English in most parts. I'm on North Uist in the Western Isles, or Nahalin and Shire, which I believe is the Gaelic name. And this is my first time here. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here. It's after all my years of walking in Scotland, it's been a long time coming. Somewhere I've always wanted to come to, but it's such a long way and it's a bit of a trek to get to. Not only is it a long way, sometimes the way the ferries are, sorry, I'm trying to hop through bogs here. The way the ferries are timed means that you have to actually, it's one thing to book a week getting away to the Western Isles, but then you have to think about when you're going to get the ferry in, so you can't necessarily drive all the way to Uig on Skye of a morning from the central belt. So it takes a bit of planning to actually have any decent holiday here. But finally I've made it. Finally found my way back to a semblance of a path. When I arrived yesterday on the ferry from Uig on Skye, it was murky like this and the tops of the higher hills were in cloud, but then disembarking at Lochmaddy, suddenly just blue sky appeared from nowhere and it ended up this beautiful sparkling evening. And because North Uist is really, I mean, much of it is water, lots of pools of lochans and that, and then the sea is always close by, whether it's sea lochs or there's lots of freshwater lochs, and it's surrounded by sea. So when you get really bright conditions like last night, the whole place just seems to glow. It's so much reflected light everywhere. And I found the cottage very quickly that I'm staying in. Had a quick introduction from the owner, then I rushed out to get some supplies because it's Saturday and everything's shut today being Sunday. So I went to get some supplies, but then I ended up, even though I bought my shopping and all my fresh goods, I ended up scrambling up and down any little knoll or hill I could find just on that small drive to get lofty views of an incredible landscape. I mean, in that light, I mean, it looks very different today. Today it looks like you could be anywhere in Scotland really. You could be in parts of Sutherland. Brown, a bit dreich. I mean, magnificent, but you know, a bit, not the most beautiful place necessarily at this moment. But yesterday, coming off a ferry and then driving around in the evening, in that light, it was easily the most beautiful place I have ever seen. And it's just my first few hours on one island in the Western Isles. I went up a hill just outside Lochmaddy, actually. It's only 90 metres high, just as the sun was setting. It was amazing. Such a beautiful light, and it's such a strange landscape. I haven't seen anything else like it. I've never seen anything like it before. And I knew it was going to be different when I got here, but I wasn't quite expecting it to be quite as gobsmackingly beautiful in that light. Really impressed. Today though, I'm heading up what is the highest point on North Uist, just shy of 350 metres high, which is this, over here. Its name's Eabhal, E-A-V-A-L, and stands pretty much by itself, apart from there's a small lump here, then there's two higher hills behind here called the Two Lees. But it's isolated, it's not huge, but as with any coastal hill that stands by itself, the views will be typically immense. So the virtue of this one is it's very small. So even today with the gloom that's come in, you can see the hills and harrows have disappeared, they're higher. This one hopefully is going to stay free of cloud just for a few hours so I can get up and down. It really is a simple case of just following a rocky ridge all the way up. very boggy down here by the loch, but by all accounts, once you're over there on drier ground, on rocky ground, it's actually fine to pick your way up, albeit pathless. Wonderful name, Eabhal. Don't know what it means, but Val, that's the Norse element to it. The Vikings were here from the 8th century for a few hundred years, and their mark's been stamped on a lot of the Hebrides in terms of names. Eabhal, Val means hill. And I think it's the same derivation that gives English its fells, in places like Yorkshire and Cumbria. Fells both have a Norse origin, I think. I've never been here before, so I'm not really that familiar with the hills in the Western Isles, aside from a few notable ones like this one. So I don't know how prevalent that suffix is, the Val suffix. Certainly on rum, in the inner Hebrides, it's very prominent. Wonderful names that just roll off the tongue in this sort of lilting, rhythmic, rhyming way, sort of Hallival and Askival and Runsaval and Trollaval, Barkaval. Lovely, lovely sort of, you can tell they've got that Scandinavian sort of roll to them. And on rum, there's, is it Trollaval, Hill of the Trolls, that the Norsemen called because there's thousands and thousands of manx shearwaters, birds, seagoing birds, that come back every spring, and they're ground nesting birds. They nest in burrows high up on the hill, up to altitudes of sort of 800 metres. Really, and it's bonkers, and they only move around at night, and they make this really strange, otherworldly noise. This sort of warbling, deep warbling, almost like croaking noise. And you can hear them when they come in. If you stand on a loch at night, if you stand at Loch Screesaw on rum, when it's late at night, midnight, 1 in the morning, you can hear these birds coming in and them calling, and they fly all the way up the hill. But they thought there were trolls living up there, hence Trollaval, Hill of the Trolls. And I suppose that's part of the reason why climbing hills as a leisure pursuit is such a recent thing for people to do. Sort of assume that because we know that there's a benefit, a physical and mental benefit to being out in nature in the great outdoors, we know it's good for us. It seems strange to think that there was a time when people didn't know that, but people had better things to do with their time, quite frankly, like living and surviving. But there was also this belief that excuse me, there's also this belief that here lie dragons, unknown places where the gods and the trolls and the elves or the pixies, fairies, dragons, whatever your chosen beast or myth was, there was a belief that they dwelled in all these wild places, so there was no need to come up here, and people were fearful of them. There's a wonderful book by, I think it's Fergus Fleming, called Killing Dragons, and it's a history of climbing in the Alps. And it sort of tells how in the 15th and 16th centuries there were sort of very, very daring people who refused to believe that there were these beasts up here, and who came up and they found some sort of solace, some kind of spiritual meaning or connection, whatever they were looking for, they found in the hills, and they found sort of evidence of creation or whatever, whatever. Anyway, they found that they were actually uplifting, positive, pleasant places to be. But it took hundreds of years for that belief to permeate down, and for people to sort of overcome whatever natural fears they had and start going out and exploring. I suppose really it was colonial times, the British, going out and climbing everything, especially in the Alps, climbing anything that they could possibly find. People such as Whymper, who was the first to climb the Matterhorn with his team, who died on the way down. Just that sort of bonkers gentleman at play, colonial let's go and climb and conquer everything attitude that was so key in the empire, which saw us going around the globe conquering and climbing. But it played a large part in actually making the mountains, the Lake District as well, places that were romanticised and visited. And that's where we are now, I suppose, coming to places like this that you can't imagine people a few hundred years ago coming here for pleasure. I have almost slipped over more times than I can count actually in the past 10 minutes. It's just that really horrid boggy stuff where it looks like grass but then it just slides from under your foot, which isn't great when you're trying to recover from a knee injury, having some strange sudden reflex in your knee and your leg to try and compensate for a fall. Likely to do myself another injury. Speaking of which, the knee's actually been alright-ish. I think I'm just resigned to the fact now that I'm always going to have knee problems, so just have to put up with it. But the wobbles and slips and bogs and trudging and squelching are illustrative, I suppose, of why people underestimate hills, especially in places like this, in the Hebrides. I've known a few people from Europe, Switzerland actually, over the years, and they've poo-pooed and belittled these tiny little hills of ours. And I keep saying to them, you know, they've got the same, some of them have got the same level of ascent from the glens up to their summits, because some of them are at sea level, as many of their hills have, they're mountains, where you start at 2,000 metres and climb up to 3,000 metres. It's the same principle really. And they tend to be on nice solid ground with beautiful swift paths, whereas here on these far-flung places it's a lot more difficult to get anywhere. So today this one's only 347 metres. It's only a walk in of about 4 or 5 kilometres, but you're having to really pay for it in effort. And these aren't easy. These aren't, this is rated as quite an arduous walk simply because of the terrain, because it's so boggy, rocky, pathless. It does annoy me when people sort of dismiss our hills as being wee or somehow inferior or not as challenging, because every year you have people, accidents and fatalities even. It's often people from Europe, I suppose, especially in Glencoe, who come here thinking they're just, a walkover, and they're not. And then people get into trouble. If you go and approach them with respect, maybe there's more chance that they'll respect you in return. Anyway, I'm nearing the corner of the loch. There's just a beach to cross here, I think, and then it's straight up. I'll be glad to get up there high, actually, onto rocky ground rather than all this bog. Oh, and there's the beach. Very nice. It would have been lovely yesterday, sitting on here in the sunshine. Right, so begins the up, about 1,000 feet I think. Well, it turns out I thought I was going to be walking on rock at least, but I'm not. It's still just as squelchy and slippy and treacherous as it was down there. But the views are now opening up. This funny sort of rock and lochen landscape. Lots of sort of rugged, very old rocks potted with lochens. There's sky on the horizon. Very northern tip of sky. And there are, I think they're non-biting midges, lots of non-biting midges buzzing around. Not as small as proper midges. People get quite freaked out by them, but they don't bite, they just sort of amass in clouds and stick to you, so they're not pleasant, but they don't bite. And there's quite a few of them around. They've come out in the mild weather. We are now spring, this is the first day of astronomical spring. I don't like it. I'm not ready to let winter go just yet. I don't want to be having to contend with ticks and midges and clegs. This sort of weather, this sort of terrain, with all the deer around, this sort of stuff. If you go walking through all this, I'm sure you come out with some ticks attached to you. That's about the only wildlife I've seen today, I think. Such a contrast to yesterday. Just on driving to the co-op, which was about 5 or 6 miles. Short-eared owl, one of the owls that hunts in daylight. Sat out fence, flew right in front of the car. There was gannets on the way in, the first gannets I've seen this season on the way in from the ferry. A porpoise out there while I was sat reclining on the ferry. Lots of buzzards sat at the roadside. Lapwings, do love a lapwing. And then driving around, sort of doing a little recce to see what was here. Drove around the main road on the island and there was a sea eagle, a white-tailed eagle, being harassed by ravens right by the roadside. It was wildlife leaping out at me yesterday. It's conspicuous by its absence today. So still. I'm sure it won't be up there, but it's deathly quiet. Oh, it's only 7 or 8 degrees, but it's really close. It's quite strange, really. The one thing, there's a few things that spring to mind when I think of the Western Isles. Maca for one, corncrakes, sandy beaches, but more than those, storms, violent hurricane-force storms, and there's been no shortage of them in the last couple of years. So it's quite strange to be here on a day as flat calm as this, because usually the only time that this part of the world makes the news, it's certainly in national headlines, is when they have some token reporter sat out on a headland or in Stornoway Harbour watching boats rocking and risking their lives for the sake of 24-hour news. The Western Isles and the Uists especially are known for their wildlife, bird life. And at the moment there's a rare falcon from Greenland, which is somewhere on the island. I'm sure there's lots of twitchers coming over from the mainland hurriedly. And there's a snowy owl that's been seen, and they're regularly seen on the Western Isles, coming down from snowier climes. So you get all kinds of seasonal visitors here that you don't get elsewhere. It's a bit of a hotspot for corncrakes, of course. Another migrant bird which favours the coastal fringes, the maca. It's a very special sort of sandy, seashell sand swept coastline, which is partly a product of very lime rich sand, which makes it very well drained on the coast, and it's an level of acidity, a lime based thing, which is in stark contrast to the interiors here. And but it's also a product of just the way humans have managed the land for a long time. Very low intensity grazing and crop rotation, keeping the sward very short, lets wildflowers grow. So this stretch of islands, and especially the west coast, the western fringes, are famous for having in summer just a riot of wildflowers, and the long grass and the way they manage the coastal strip is very good for corncrakes. It's the top, getting closer but still a way off. Must have done about 100 metres I think by now. But it's all this stuff, this where people have walked. This is the path. But when you're coming down, that's when your boots take and slip. So I'm half tempted just to strike my own route down the hill, avoiding all this well-worn stuff. I'm sure I'll be better off on this stuff in the heather Oh, and there it is, our summit. Well, it's an amazing view, but it's a bit breezy up here, so warm clothes, tea, cake, lunch, blah blah blah, and then have a better look. Today's walk was brought to you and powered by caramel shortbread. So much sugar. Right, I've been sat here about 15 minutes, and just in the time I've sat here, the wind's actually picking up. This is the weather getting gradually worse over the next couple of days as the Atlantic comes rushing back in, and we're away from all the calm, settled, dead calm, high pressure conditions we've had, and we're back to gales and the rest of it, and rain. So I'm not going to linger much longer, but it does give some chance to actually look at what's here. You can see just how much water there is. I mean, it's insane, isn't it, how much water there is here. North Uist does appear to be more water than land, frankly. You can see the way I've come up. It was where did I come up from? I'll say that, I can't find it. There, that's where I've started. The park there at the end of the road, and then you walked along this narrow bit here and around this knoll, and I've come up the ridge. That's the two leas there. Loch Maddie is down there somewhere, way off in the distance. Barely see it. I could actually see it better when I first arrived here, but the Sound of Harris is over there. When I came on the boat yesterday, you could see Harris, all of Harris and Lewis sticking out that way, all the way along the horizon there. So that visibility is really, really deteriorated. North Uist stretches all the way around here, and this enormous, great big flat expanse you can see out here, that's Benvironment. There's a causeway that links the next island, Benvironment, and beyond that is South Uist, which is way over there in the mist. Again, had better views of that just now with the hills on South Uist, but they've disappeared too. You do at least get the sense of this place and what a watery place it is. It's a shame you can't get a better view of actually the Western Isles in general. As an archipelago, it stretches all the way from Barrow Head down on the Isle of Barrow, way to the south, way over there, up through Harris and Lewis, up to the butt of Lewis. In all about 130 miles, I think, from south to north. Not in a big straight line from south to north, it's kind of curves. The island's kind of curved like that in an arc. But a very, 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 very diverse and strange landscape. Some of the oldest rocks in Europe, some 540 million years old or something thereabouts. Really old gnarled rocks, very, very hard, which is why they've withstood everything that's been chucked at them over 500 something million years. Incredible place. So glad I've come up here. I wish the weather was a bit clearer, but it's not raining and it's not blowing a gale, so I'm not going to complain. Right, well, I'm fed and watered, I've lingered a lot, I'm getting quite cold, I've got everything on. It's not like it's a raging storm or it's the middle of winter where it's sub-zero, but it's still cold because the air's quite damp. So I'm going to head back down. I just went to head off. What's really striking actually is just how flat a lot of this is, in between all the hillocks and little mounds that are around. Just how flat it is. You really sort of appreciate when you're up here and you see it, just how windy it must get here. When storms come in, they come blasting through here. There's nothing to... I mean, these winds don't meet anything. They come off the Atlantic, and this is it. It's the first thing they meet, and even then, there's no great hills for it to sort of... the friction to slow down. It's just vast and open and windswept. You really get a sense of it up here. I suppose also you get a sense of just how low-lying a lot of it is. The flat stuff where lots of the crofting settlements are. And with water levels rising, you have to wonder how susceptible places like this will be in the long run to, rising sea levels and inundation during times of storm and very high tides. Oh yeah, interesting place. Right, time to head down.